Hello and welcome to a Talmud Israeli production. Today we'll review the highlights of this week's course of Daf Yomi study, Masechet Bava Kamma, pages 80 through 86, Pei through Pei-Vav. 80. Ger shenaflu lo klavim v'chazvim birushato. What happens if a convert inherited items from his non-Jewish family members, and these are items that a Jew is not supposed to raise in his home or have in his possessions? For example, klavim, dangerous dogs, or chazirim, pigs. Well, we force the guy to give it up immediately, which would be a financial loss, or rather, do we allow him to benefit from possession of these items so long as he's willing to remove them from his possession slowly but surely? So the Gemara says, "Ein mechayven oto limkor miyad." We do not force him to immediately rid himself of these things. Lamochel al yad al yad. Rather, one at a time, he can sell off these verboten, forbidden possessions, and eventually he'll be in the clear, but able to keep the cash. 81. Meit mitzvah kona mekoma. If a body of a human being is found out in the yonder, and there was no one to bury the body, and you find it, you have an obligation to bury this body. It's a meit mitzvah. It's a very important obligation, very important religious requirement. And the body acquires the place where it is in that moment. You bury it right then and there. Uraminhu, but we have a contradiction. Gemara says, "Motzi mutal istratia." If you find that the body is on the road, you can move the body to the left or to the right, to your convenience. So Rabbi explained, the mutal al meitzer. Well, that was an example where the body was lying across the pathway with no way a person could move forward without encountering this dead body. So the body had to be moved. Since once you have permission to remove it from its current location, you, the finder, can move it to whichever side is convenient for your own purposes. Paybet 82. Asara takanot tiken Ezra. That Ezra HaSofer, in the early days of the Second Temple, enacted 10 enactments, takanot. And one of them was, Shekon B'Torah, B'mincha b'Shabbat, B'Shin v'Chamishi, that will read the Torah in the synagogue on Sabbath afternoons at mincha time, and on Mondays and Thursdays. So Ezra Tiken? The Gemara wonders, was it really Ezra who enacted these rules? But these rules were from way back, from a long time ago. The Tanya, as we have a Braita that says the following. That the Israelites in the wilderness went 3 days and didn't find water. Ein mayim ela Torah. And we have a tradition, a homiletic tradition, that water equals Torah. That they went 3 days without learning. So the enactment was that if you want to not suffer any troubles, don't go 3 days without learning Torah. Have the public reading periodically. So Mondays, Thursdays, and Shabbatot. Well, what happened was this. The original enactment from the bygone era was one person receiving an aliyah, okay, with 3 psukim being read. However, Ezra's enactment was that you have to have 3 people getting called for aliyot, and 10 psukim in total are read. 83. Amar Rabbi. Rabbi Huda Hanasi, the redactor of the Mishnah, the patriarch, he said the following. Be'eretz Yisrael, in the land of Israel, Lashon Sursi Lama. Why is anybody speaking this jargon of Western Aramaic? O Lashon Kodesh, O Lashon Yavanit. A person should speak a pristine language, either the holy tongue of Hebrew, the national language of the Jewish people, or the impressive language of the Gentiles, Greek. Amar Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Yossi said in Babylonia, Lashon Arami Lamali. Why is anybody speaking Eastern Aramaic in Babylonia? O Lashon Kodesh, either speak the language of the Jews, which is Hebrew, O Lashon Parsi, or the Persian language, Farsi, which is the most prestigious language in the East. So basically, some of the leading figures in Rabbinic Judaism are saying that jargon, or a mishmash of languages, is cultural corruption, and either you should be culturally Jewish with Hebrew, or culturally elitist by speaking the most impressive Gentile language, but not this mishmash of a corrupt jargon. 84. Niske Adam, ba'adam. If man hurts another man, in Govnotobabavel, we do not adjudicate these kind of court cases, damage cases, in Babylonia. Why? Because it requires musmachim, the Torah demands that we have fully ordained judges to handle these kinds of cases. Now, how do we handle anything then outside the land of Israel? The ordained judges are in Eretz Yisrael. The Babylonian rabbis are not really ordained judges. So the answer is shlichut ha'kavdinan. We do the agency of the Israeli authorities. We are their shlichim. So we're doing our shlichut by handling some types of cases, even in the diaspora, despite not being ordained. So why not the cases of Adam ba'Adam? The answer is that we're only handling those cases which we're familiar with, the kimlon begave, where we know how to rule. But where it's really unfamiliar to us, we're not going to take any chances, and we don't handle such cases. 85. Tani Rabbi Yishmael, Omer v'rapo yirapeh. The Torah tells us that there is doctoring, that the physicians ply their trade, that they do their work in the case of someone being injured in an accident. So from here we see that there is permission, biblical permission for a doctor to do what it is that he does. Remember that a fundamentalist religious perspective could be that being a physician and offering medical care is contrary to God's wishes. That if a person gets sick or is injured, it was God's will for them to suffer and to ultimately die of their disease or to be cured without human intervention because that was God's will. And that any human intervention is a disruption in what God wanted. Comes along the Torah to say, no, that's not true, and the rabbinic tradition, it's not true. It is perfectly fine and appropriate for the doctor to ply his trade. Pevav, 86. Kulan ro'enotan, kilohem b'nei chorin, shodim nechsehen. Shen b'nei Avram, Yitzchak v'Yakov, Irav Meir. So the question is, how do we assess boshet, embarrassment? Embarrassment is one of the 5 components of the Nezikin payments when one person harms another person. But how do you assess the embarrassment? It might depend upon the stature of the person being embarrassed. That the greater they are, the more you have to pay, and the lower they are on the totem pole, the less you have to pay. So, according to Rabbi Meir, we assess everyone as being a freed person who went down in their assets, but they're all the sons of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. That were the descendants of the Hebrew patriarchs, and so there's a certain kavod we all deserve. Rabbi Yehuda says we follow whatever they are, their social standing. If they're an elite person, you're going to pay an elite dollar. If they're a low-standing person, you're going to pay not very much. Rabbi Shimon Omer, if they were rich, we'll view them as people who had assets and lost their assets. And if they're poor, we'll reckon them as the lowest of the low, the poorest of the poor, which means then that you're going to pay less. If you are the bad actor here, you're going to pay less in boshet than you otherwise might have. It's a leniency granted to the aggressor in this particular case. Everyone have a great week.